The first time I laid eyes on a precursor relic, I understood why the hegemony had banned humans from even touching them. The chamber was vast, impossibly so, with ceilings that dissolved into darkness and walls carved from a single seamless material that shimmered like liquid metal. It hummed, not audibly, but in a way that vibrated through the bones, a resonance older than stars themselves. Every being present, even the most experienced archaeologists from 10 civilizations, stepped cautiously, some trembling, some silent, all aware that these objects were not merely artifacts. They were warnings, tests, and perhaps traps. I had been brought as an observer, a liaison from Earth, ostensibly to record human interactions with alien relics for the Hegemony archives. But the truth was more complicated. The humans assigned to study the precursor devices were not only allowed to touch, probe, and calibrate, they seemed almost to instinctively understand them. Where others hesitated, we advanced. Where others faltered in confusion, we improvised. My companions' awe turned to unease when they noticed that humans, myself included, approached the relics differently. Not with fear, not with reverence, but with an almost dangerous curiosity. The first relic we encountered was a cube, 3 meters on each side, hovering above the floor without any visible support. Its surfaces shifted patterns subtly, like a living language trying to communicate. Alien technicians hovered at a distance, scanning it, using instruments that could decode matter itself, yet the readings were inconsistent, as if the cube resisted comprehension. One of my team, a human engineer, reached out, fingertips grazing the surface. Instantly, the patterns changed, rippling outward, as though recognizing a new mind. Data that had confounded the alien sensors for decades flowed into our instruments, then vanished before anyone else could record it. The aliens gasped. The hegemony observers took careful note. I did not yet know the full consequences of that touch. Humans, I realized, had a peculiar relationship with danger. Unlike the other species in the chamber, we did not freeze at the unknown, nor did we retreat from its implicit threat. Our instincts had evolved in worlds that punished hesitation, cities on fault lines, oceans that swallowed nations, skies that rained fire. Danger was familiar. It demanded respect, yes, but not paralysis. When we approached the relic, it was as if the centuries of surviving collapse and catastrophe had trained our brains to read patterns that others could not even see. The precursor devices responded to that. Subtle, imperceptible shifts in electromagnetic resonance, in temporal oscillations, even in the tactile vibration of matter. These were invisible to all others, but registered immediately with a human hand. It was not just intuition. It was improvisation. We altered the relic's orientation, gently probing one side while tracing symbols on another. Where alien instruments failed, we inserted makeshift human sensors, recalibrated them in real time, fed data back into the system. And the relics reacted, almost cooperatively, revealing mechanisms, energy flows, and sequences that had been dormant for millennia. My alien colleagues' apprehension turned to alarm. Why are they allowed to manipulate it? One whispered, its voice trembling in its guttural throat. Another added, this is prohibited by hegemony law. Only specialists may interact. I understood immediately what they feared. Humans did not just observe, they activated. And in doing so, we made the relics behave in ways the hegemony could not predict. One device, a sphere no larger than a human head, began emitting pulses that reconfigured the chamber's gravitational field, creating microfluctuations that caused tools to float and air currents to twist. The alien technicians scrambled, shouting warnings, while the human engineers remained calm, adjusting their approach in real time, reading subtle cues, and preventing catastrophic overloads without hesitation. By the time the first shift stabilized, the council observers convened. Murmurs of alarm spread through the chamber. Humans are too adaptive, one elder said. They interact with precursor devices in ways no other species can. They are unpredictable. A younger analyst added, it's not just adaptation. They improvise solutions that bypass safety protocols. If they can do this without knowing the full consequences, imagine what would happen if they were left unsupervised. It became clear why the ban existed. The hegemony did not prohibit humans because we were reckless. It prohibited us because we were competent in ways others could not contain. We interpreted the relics as puzzles, challenges, or instruments to understand, not as sacred objects to fear. And that combination, the courage to engage, the intelligence to adapt, and the audacity to act, was terrifying to civilizations that measured risk by avoidance. As the council deliberated, I traced the faint ripples left by the human touch across the chamber floor. The relics had changed. The room itself hummed differently. And in that subtle resonance, I felt it. The humans were awakening something older than memory, older than the hegemony itself. Something that might never have intended to be touched at all. The chamber had barely settled from the first interaction when the council's security protocols activated. It was subtle at first, a low hum that vibrated through the floor, sensors flickering along the walls, alien drones repositioning themselves in anticipation of something the hegemony had long feared, but never fully articulated. We were ordered to retreat, but the human engineers, my team, hesitated. They did not panic. They did not flinch. Instead, they studied the patterns of the security system, intuitively understanding the rhythms, the blind spots, and the timings. I had seen humans navigate disasters, collapsing buildings, raging storms, and volcanic eruptions without hesitation. Now I understood this instinct extended to the relics themselves. One of the smaller precursor spheres hovered above the floor, spinning slowly, emitting pulses that warped the very air around it. Alien observers recoiled at each movement, murmuring warnings in their guttural tongue. "It is unstable," one said, though instability seemed relative. The sphere had existed for tens of thousands of years, and yet here we were, humans approaching it as if it were a simple tool. A human scientist extended a gloved hand, touching the sphere lightly. Almost immediately, the room responded. Gravity subtly shifted. Holographic projections of the relic's internal energy cascaded across the chamber walls. The alien instruments went haywire, unable to process the sudden, emergent signals. The council erupted into discussion, debating the propriety of allowing humans to continue. The ban, they reminded one another, was not a precaution, it was law. Precursor relics were not to be touched except by the most experienced specialists, carefully trained and fully vetted over centuries. The humans in front of them, however, were neither cautious nor reckless. They were uncanny in their effectiveness. One of the alien technicians whispered to me, voice strained. "They improvise too well. They cannot be predicted, and they cannot be stopped once engaged." I watched as another human approached a relic shaped like a vast crystalline lattice, spanning nearly 10 meters in height. The lattice emitted faint harmonic tones, frequencies that resonated differently with each species present. The humans closed their eyes briefly, as if listening to the vibrations with their entire bodies, adjusting their movements in subtle, imperceptible ways. To the alien observers, it seemed impossible. How could such small, untrained creatures manipulate forces their most advanced instruments could barely detect? Yet they did so, delicately rerouting energy flows, neutralizing potential overloads, stabilizing the relic without fully understanding its mechanisms. The Hegemony's security drones activated fully, forming a protective barrier around the chamber. Alien scholars and engineers shouted warnings, some raising shields or deploying containment fields. But the humans reacted calmly. They analyzed the drone's movement patterns in real time, anticipating trajectories and adjusting their positions to avoid interference. One engineer even used a small handheld device to recalibrate the energy output of a nearby relic, preventing a cascade that could have disabled half the chamber's instrumentation. By all measures, this should have been impossible. In the council's observation deck, whispers spread like wildfire. "They are not reckless. They are adaptive," an elder muttered, eyes wide. Another added, "And worse, they are creative under pressure. They improvise solutions no one else could conceive." The words hung in the chamber like a warning. Humans did not merely survive unpredictability, they thrived in it. Every step, every touch, every adjustment was a test of understanding, and humans passed not because they were careful, but because they were fearless and imaginative in ways alien civilizations were not. I realized then why the Hegemony's prohibition existed. It was not about caution. It was about control. Precursor relics were not merely powerful, they were unpredictable. Left in the hands of species conditioned to obey rules and avoid risk, they remained inert. Left to humans, they responded. They awakened. They became tools for understanding, unlocking pathways and energies that had lain dormant for eons. The aliens feared what might happen if humans were allowed to continue, because in truth, no one could predict the consequences. A ripple of energy pulsed from the central relic, cascading outward like an invisible wave. Humans adapted instantly, their hands moving across controls, their instruments recalibrating midwave. The alien observers froze, uncertain whether the outcome would be catastrophic or miraculous. And in that instant, I understood what the Hegemony had long feared. Humans did not merely follow protocols, they improvised them, improving them in real time, bending the impossible into the achievable. When the pulse subsided, the chamber was changed. Not destroyed, not harmed, but transformed. The relics had responded. The humans had learned something. The council whispered among themselves, a soundless dread filling the observation deck. For the first time, they began to understand. Humans were not a species that could be contained around precursor artifacts. They were catalysts. And catalysts, by their nature, could not be controlled. By the third day, the council no longer observed in detached curiosity. Their apprehension had turned into something more urgent, almost defensive. The humans were no longer just handling relics. They were reading them, predicting their subtle reactions, coaxing mechanisms that had lain dormant for millennia into motion. The precursor artifacts seemed to recognize the difference. Alien researchers had spent centuries cataloging energy patterns, yet the humans' interactions produced signals no algorithm could have anticipated. It was not instinct alone. It was an instinct sharpened by history, danger, and audacity. The most ambitious relic was a spire of black crystal, stretching toward the chamber ceiling, suspended above a platform without support, its surface etched with shifting glyphs of unknown origin. The council warned us not to touch it. It was considered volatile, capable of releasing energy bursts that could annihilate the floor of the chamber if mismanaged. Alien specialists had studied it for centuries, yet it had never yielded more than fragmented data. Humans approached cautiously, but with no fear. One by one, we placed hands on the glyphs, tracing patterns that seemed incomprehensible to every other species. Immediately, the spire responded. Light cascaded through its facets, projecting a lattice of energy onto the walls. Vibrations hummed in resonance with human neural frequencies. Alien sensors overloaded, producing incomprehensible readings. A Hegemony technician muttered, It is communicating with them. Others dismissed the notion, but none could explain how humans, untrained in precursor linguistics, were eliciting responses that the most sophisticated instruments could not detect. The relic was not merely alive, it was aware. And it recognized something uniquely human. We were not told to experiment. Yet, experimentation happened. A human linguist, young and unassuming, traced her fingers along the spire's surface, humming a low melody in her own language. The crystal vibrated, altering its projected energy patterns. Light became harmonic waves, intertwining with the ambient field in ways that caused drones to pause mid-flight, instruments to recalibrate spontaneously, and the chamber's very atmosphere to shift. Every alien present realized something terrifying. The humans were not following rules, they were writing new ones. The relics obeyed curiosity, intuition, and pattern recognition, traits the Hegemony had long feared in our species. The council erupted into whispers and urgent gestures. One elder, voice quivering, said, "These humans, they bypass every safeguard, every precaution. If they continue, the chamber will become unpredictable." Another added, "It is not recklessness. It is calculation without protocol. Their logic is not linear. It adapts in real time. We cannot anticipate it." And yet, the humans continued, each interaction measured, each adjustment precise yet intuitive. It was a controlled chaos that no alien mind could fully grasp. By the fifth hour, The chamber itself had changed. Microfractures appeared along the spire's base, releasing faint pulses of energy that the aliens had feared. But the humans did not falter. Instead, they repositioned instruments, adjusted angles, and fed the pulses back into the spire in a controlled feedback loop. Energy that could have destroyed half the floor was now being harnessed to reveal hidden glyphs, secret compartments, and latent functions encoded by a civilization older than memory. The aliens watched in disbelief. Humans did not merely survive risk, they converted it into knowledge. The Council's fear was no longer abstract. If a human could manipulate one of these relics safely, imagine what would happen if a human were left alone with a Precursor archive. Entire technologies, civilizations, even forces previously dormant could be activated. The Hegemony had never permitted this. That was why the ban existed. Not because humans were careless, but because humans were too capable, too adaptive, too unknowable. Every touch, every improvisation, was a glimpse into potential outcomes that could not be contained. One of the younger humans, noticing a dormant glyph, tapped a sequence in rapid succession, improvising based on intuition rather than instruction. The spire responded violently at first, emitting a shockwave that bent instruments and lifted small objects. Every alien recoiled, expecting chaos, destruction, failure. Yet the human adjusted midwave, subtly redirecting energy pulses. Within moments, the relic stabilized, revealing a hidden compartment containing a precursor data core. Alien specialists stared, speechless. This core had been inaccessible for thousands of cycles, yet now it lay exposed, readable. The humans had unlocked it without knowledge, using instinct honed by survival in a world that demanded improvisation. The Council finally realized the unthinkable. The humans were not simply researchers, they were catalysts. They could awaken relics, coax dormant systems, and manipulate forces the Hegemony had labeled untouchable. The ban existed because humans were not predictable. They could not be contained by rules, protocols, or centuries of caution. And as I watched the Council digest this truth, I understood the real danger. The humans' curiosity was not just adaptive, it was transformative. The universe itself might be altered by their touch. By the fourth day, the chamber had become a theater of tension. The Council no longer spoke in whispers. They issued directives, cautions, and ultimatums, yet the humans, my team, continued their work with an unsettling calm. The Precursor Relics had begun responding to us in ways that defied prediction. Energy flows shifted to follow our movements, glyphs realigned to reflect our gestures, and pulses that had once been inert suddenly flared with latent power. The Council's unease was palpable. They understood now that this was no ordinary interaction. Humanity was awakening the relics. One relic, a massive lattice sphere suspended in the center of the chamber, had remained dormant for centuries. Alien scientists had scanned it repeatedly, but all readings were ambiguous. When a human approached, however, the sphere's facets shimmered like liquid starlight. Tiny currents of energy arced toward her hands, and faint symbols began to rotate across its surface. She did not step back. She adjusted her stance, moving her fingers along the glyphs in patterns that seemed improvised yet precise. The alien council recoiled at each pulse of light. Some whispered of catastrophe. Others simply stared, unable to comprehend what they were witnessing. The humans did not make mistakes. Every shift in energy, every reaction of the relic, was anticipated and counterbalanced instinctively. They had learned to manage the unpredictable, not through fear, but through experience. Generations of survival on a chaotic planet had taught humans to read subtle cues, to react before events became disasters, to improvise solutions that no algorithm could predict. The Council realized, with mounting horror, that these were traits no other species had developed in the controlled stability of their own worlds. A sudden pulse erupted from the sphere, sending microwaves of energy across the chamber. Drones buzzed uncontrollably, instruments sparked, and the alien observers shouted instructions. But the human engineers remained focused. They redirected the energy using handheld devices, stabilizing the sphere in seconds. Where the Council had expected panic, destruction, and failure, There was instead mastery. By the time the wave dissipated, the relic had revealed hidden inner structures, previously undetectable cores, and encoded data streams. For the aliens, the implications were staggering. Humans had activated secrets that had lain dormant for millennia. The council convened urgently in the observation deck. The discussion was no longer about rules or law. It was about containment, risk, and the terrifying reality that humans could not be controlled in proximity to precursor artifacts. They do not fear failure, one elder said. They interpret danger as information. Each pulse, each instability, is data. They improvise in ways no protocol can predict. Another added, it is not recklessness. It is instinct, experience, and innovation. Combined, it is uncontrollable. The words hung heavy in the air. Humanity's strength was not in brute force or technology. It was in the very way we engaged with the universe. We moved to another relic, a massive rectangular prism that emitted low-frequency vibrations across the floor. The aliens had warned us that one misstep could trigger a cascade, collapsing sections of the chamber or releasing energy beyond containment. Humans approached cautiously but deliberately. Fingers traced glyphs, instruments were adjusted in real time, and subtle improvisations corrected unexpected energy shifts. The prism began to resonate in response, projecting holographic patterns that formed maps of precursor networks spanning light years. No alien instrument had ever revealed such detail. Only humans, through improvisation and adaptive intuition, had coaxed it into this state. The council's fear reached a crescendo. One elder whispered, "If they are allowed to continue, the relics may teach them knowledge the hegemony cannot control. Knowledge we cannot even imagine." Another added, "These humans are not just interacting with precursor technology, they are reading it, rewriting it, awakening it. They are catalysts of forces we were warned not to touch." The room fell silent. The humans did not hear the whispers. They were too engrossed, too focused, too unafraid of what might happen next. It became clear why the ban existed. The hegemony did not prohibit humans because of recklessness. They prohibited them because humans were effective, adaptive, and creative in ways no other species could match. Every human touch produced outcomes that could not be predicted, measured, or contained. The council feared what humans could awaken, unlock, or manipulate. And for the first time, it was not an exaggeration, they had good reason. As I observed the chamber, watching humans continue to work, I understood the deeper truth. It was not fear that set them apart. It was curiosity tempered by survival. It was instinct forged in chaos. It was improvisation honed over millennia of catastrophe. The council's prohibition was not law. It was caution, fear, and desperation all fused together. And yet, in the face of that fear, humans pressed forward, reshaping the relics, and perhaps reshaping the galaxy itself. The final pulse from the prism echoed through the chamber. Light flared across every wall. The humans paused, looked at one another, and smiled faintly. None of the aliens could predict what would happen next. But I did. Humanity was about to learn secrets the galaxy had sworn should remain hidden. And once learned, nothing, not law, not force, not fear, would contain it. By the fifth day, the council no longer attempted to control us. They had abandoned caution in favor of observation, though their silence was not calm. It was dread. Every relic we touched responded in ways that had never been documented, revealing hidden chambers, latent energies, and mechanisms that had lain dormant for tens of thousands of years. Humans did not merely interact with these artifacts. We conversed with them. We nudged them. We interpreted vibrations, light patterns, and electromagnetic pulses as language, instinctively, almost as if we had been speaking it all along. The largest relic, a colossal obelisk stretching nearly 20 meters, had remained inert for centuries. Alien engineers had declared it impossible to activate without triggering catastrophic containment failures. The council feared even our proximity. Yet the humans approached with steady hands, intuition guiding each movement. Fingertips traced symbols etched across the obelisk surface. Energy surged along its edges, radiating outward like ripples in a pond. Drones hovered at the perimeter, their sensors overloaded, instruments sparking from the influx of unanticipated energy. Where others would have panicked, the humans adjusted, calibrated, and improvised in real time. A soft hum filled the chamber as the obelisk shifted. Holographic glyphs projected into the air, forming patterns that no alien had ever deciphered. Humans read them intuitively, interpreting sequences as if the relic were speaking directly to their minds. One engineer tapped a series of glyphs in sequence, and the obelisk responded with subtle gravitational fluctuations, lifting platforms and redirecting energy currents in precise, controlled ways. The council recoiled, whispering warnings, but the humans remained unshaken. Their understanding of chaos and adaptability rendered the relic's power manageable. Where others saw danger, humans saw patterns, possibilities, and opportunities. It became painfully clear why the Hegemony banned humans from handling Precursor Relics. The prohibition was not born of caution, nor of superstition. It existed because humans were competent in ways no other species could match. Where aliens hesitated, humans acted. Where others froze, humans improvised. And where systems had been deemed too volatile to touch, humans coaxed them into function. The Council's fear was not of recklessness, it was of potential. Potential they could not predict, control, or contain. The humans moved next to a series of interconnected spheres suspended midair, dormant for millennia. The spheres pulsed faintly as we approached, responding to proximity, resonance, and the subtle energy of human intent. With deliberate gestures, the humans linked the spheres in sequence. Energy flowed through them like liquid light, cascading from one to the next. The aliens watched in horror as the spheres activated mechanisms that revealed data archives, holographic star maps, and engineering schematics encoded in the very lattice of precursor design. Entire civilizations' worth of knowledge lay before us, waiting to be understood. One council member whispered, barely audible, "They are catalysts. Every touch, every movement, they awaken the relics. They cannot be stopped." Another replied, "This is why the ban exists. Knowledge beyond comprehension is now at their fingertips. We have no control." Fear radiated through the observation chamber. The humans were not reckless, they were unstoppable. Their combination of curiosity, intuition, and experience with chaos allowed them to manipulate forces the galaxy had long deemed untouchable. Then the final event occurred. A sphere in the center of the room, dormant until now, began emitting a pulse that resonated in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Aliens faltered, unsure if the energy was dangerous or benign. Humans, however, reacted instinctively. One placed a hand on the sphere, reading its harmonic feedback, and adjusted it with subtle motions, stabilizing the resonance. The sphere responded with an eruption of holographic projections, cascading knowledge across the chamber in a torrent of light and sound. Humans interpreted sequences, connected patterns, and understood fragments of technology older than the hegemony itself. The council fell silent. Even the most senior elders could not comprehend what they were witnessing. Humans had not just activated the relics, they had understood them, adapted to their responses, and integrated their patterns into actionable knowledge. For the first time in recorded galactic history, a species had mastered precursor artifacts in ways the hegemony had explicitly forbidden. As the chamber hummed with alien energy, I realized the terrifying truth. Humans were no longer merely observers. We had become participants, catalysts capable of rewriting the rules of civilizations long dead. The Council feared not destruction, not chaos, but evolution, a species that could wield knowledge beyond their predecessors, unconstrained by fear or convention. And somewhere, deep within the obelisk, a response began to stir, one that no one, human or alien, could predict. Its light pulsed with awareness, its energy shifting in anticipation of the next interaction. Humanity had awakened something older than the stars, and the galaxy would never be the same. The Council's fear crystallized in that single, unspoken realization. Humans were no longer bound by rules. They were bound only by curiosity. And curiosity, the relics seemed to think, was the deadliest force of all.